Our campaign has a secret weapon, and that secret weapon is speaking right now in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Hello, I'm Mitt Romney. And I understand the hardships facing ordinary Americans. For example, this summer, one of my horses failed to medal at the Olympics, so I know hardship.
SNL always does a nice job as we get close here to an election, but the real question is, why is Mitt Romney's campaign where it is right now? And you hear competing arguments, hey, it's the campaign and the strategy here, or it's the candidate who can't get out of its own way. New report in Politico, it paints a picture of disarray and infighting behind the scenes of Team Romney. And Andrew, they lay out here what a lot of people imagine is going on, and it's actually as bad, if not even more pronounced than we thought, from everything from the convention here to the strategy to how they position the guy, etc.
And you know, this is the kind of complaints from inside the campaign circle that we used to see the day after a failed campaign ended, or they came to light 4 years ago after the shine wore off on Sarah Palin. But a new report in Politico this morning paints a picture of behind-the-scenes disarray in the Romney campaign. Politico quotes unnamed staffers that there were several versions of Romney's primetime convention speech, and several writers asked to help craft it, but that their work was largely unused as Romney chose a version by just one author or advisor, Stu Stevens. As for the famous Clint Eastwood versus Cher performance, Politico again quotes unnamed staffers saying that Eastwood was never properly vetted, and many in the campaign were furious that he was allowed to go on without clearing his script. Says one unidentified friend of Romney, quoted by Politico, quote, "The campaign has utterly failed to switch from a primary mindset to a general election mindset and did not come up with a compelling policy-backed argument for credible change." Rich?
Okay, now, we've seen guys here at length. Listen, I made, I'm not going to say the bet I made, but if somebody told me,
you bet
we'd be
$10,000.
exactly.
You bet $10,000.
Frank, if somebody told me a few months ago that Romney would be trailing, gets nothing out of the convention here, which is, I think, kind of plausible, but he is where he is and unemployment hasn't really moved, I would have said they were nuts. And it has nothing really to do with President Obama, I think, in a perverse way, just like the Romney camp thought, hey, listen, all we got to do is get out of our way here, and the president is going to sink himself, they'll choose anybody but Obama. It's the converse.
Well, you know, first of all, I think you're kind of painting a picture of the Romney campaign that's a little bit more dire than it actually is. Romney's still competitive in a lot of the swing states and nationally. He's well within the margin of error in all the places that he's trailing.
Well, down by 11 in Pennsylvania. I don't know how competitive.
I don't think that's a battleground state. I mean, I think Obama is going to win Pennsylvania, and so I don't think things are as bad for Romney in terms of the political calculation as you made it sound just there, but. I think all this focus on unnamed sources and different drafts of the convention speech, I think it's on both sides of the aisle. I think it's such a distraction from actually focusing on issues.
Well, let's do this, Frank. Let's do candidate or campaign. He certainly hasn't been well served in the last few months. Every soundbite that you hear is unflattering or let's say, productive to get elected. Yet you have the campaign manager. He brings out that famous quote that cemented the opinions of many, if we could bring it in as to how he described who Mitt Romney at his political core is. This is what happens, Ryan. Throw him under the bus here. It's Etch-a-Sketch here. You guys will catch on a little bit.
That wasn't his campaign manager.
Ultimately, as Harry Truman.
Senior, but wait a second. But every campaign goes through Etch-a-Sketch. I mean, the guy actually had an honest, breath in his thing. What you people forget is,
who are the
Obama
people?
But Obama spent $150 million in the last 90 days on negative ads, just trashing Mitt Romney. So let's just not make
that.
But you forget it in terms of how you're dealing with your numbers. You act like it just was Mitt Romney or his advisors, and that's it.
Tom,
if I spent the
so full of it. If your candidate, you would never let your candidate go out. You would have had heads at the convention if Clint Eastwood did what he did and your guy was at the top of the ticket. And you would have taken guys apart on.
And you think that this is a margin of error race because of what Clint Eastwood did at the convention?
No, but it's a cumulative thing. When he was asked last week what the middle class is, he answered 200 to 250 grand.
Shouldn't the question be, we're dealing with the President of the United States, What has this president done in the last 3.5 years? Nobody's working. We have $16 trillion in debt. We have no sign of hope. People are leaving the workforce for no work. Shouldn't that be the story today? But we're more worried about a chair sitting over there?
That's for sure.
And you somehow think that the American people haven't been asking that question of themselves? That this is just all happening in a vacuum? The American people have been asking that question, and they're saying, you know what? We don't blame President Obama for some elements of the economy, and we like his leadership or what he's shown better than what we're seeing from Mitt
50
Romney
days
so
you'll
far.
find out the answer
If
to
it's
it.
negative ads, that's one of the factors. But
Of course,
this
it's a
all
huge
folds in.
factor.
It all folds in.
This is the president who was going to change the dynamics
But
of
you
politics.
described-
He
you-
was going
you
to open
described-
up the oceans and everything. Manna was going to
Romney's
fall from
whole
heaven.
campaign can't be Obama failed. It can't be. He has to offer something.
Frank,
He's got to offer something.
having ran a I didn't run the campaign, but having worked on a campaign in New York in 1994.
Death penalty and tax cuts. That was the Pataki campaign. It wasn't Mario Cuomo. It wasn't anybody but Cuomo. We'll give you the death penalty. We'll give you the tax cuts. What's Romney's comparable message?
And do you really believe that we won on the death penalty and tax cuts?
I think it was a big
I
help,
think
yeah.
we won because people after 12
There
years
was some
said we've
Cuomo
had enough of
fatigue,
Mario
absolutely.
Cuomo.
The Cuomo fatigue was far greater than Obama
The problem with
fatigue
Romney
right now.
is one problem, is the likability, whether or not Americans feel like I can connect to this man
I think
somehow,
it's more
some
than
way,
that.
shape, or
I
how.
think it's the connectivity, but I think you also omit. Listen, these are just 5 sound bites. I could have picked 50, but when you say, oh, you think one sound bite, it's this cumulative effect. Play them. Play the clips.
I'm not concerned about the very poor. We have a safety net.
I like being able to fire people who provide services to me.
10,000 bucks? $10,000 bet?
I have some great friends that are NASCAR team owners.
To also tell my story, I'm also unemployed.
Principle number 1 is keep the burden down on middle-income taxpayers.
$100,000 middle income?
Well, no, middle income is $200,000, $250,000 and less.
I think people wouldn't mind voting for Gordon Gekko, even in today's climate. They don't have to like the guy, but they have to think that he's competent. And they've turned, whether it's going to Britain and I don't know how you
don't think Mitt Romney's competent? I mean, really, Richard, you're a pretty smart guy. You don't think that a man that has been as successful as he has was elected governor of Massachusetts, where they have 16% of the legislature is Republican. You don't think that Mitt Romney's competent, but Barack Obama, who is a community organizer.
Tom, let me ask you a question.
Wait,
Are you
you
gonna
think
give it a
that
three-stage
you think he's
question?
not? Yeah, I'm going to give you a 4-stage question because it's preposterous to think that Mitt Romney's not competent to be president.
He has done himself a disservice by showing that not only the relatability, but many people believe he doesn't, forget about relate, understand what's going on out there. When you say something like 2 to 250 is middle income in America, you say, oh, it's a silly soundbite and stuff. But if the American public thinks, forget about liking the guy, that he doesn't understand what's going on out there, then how can he solve the problem? And I believe at the core, that and him looking like a robot and sounding like a robot is the core of it. They don't love Obama at all.
But Obama understands it, and yet he still can't solve the problem. What does that say about him?
It tells me more
What does
that
that
the
say?
public who doesn't love him says,
Right.
I'll stick with him for 4 more years because the other guy's freaking me out.
Yeah, you know, the sound bites you just played, this is only the second presidential election we've ever had in the post-YouTube era. And I think all the cumulative effect of everything he just said would have been much, much less if this was 1988 rather than 2012. But in Mitt Romney's defense, nobody has ever had to be in the post-YouTube era. 30 primary debates, and then literally speeches and interviews every single day where everything is recorded in a post-YouTube era. So I think you have to give him a little bit of wiggle room there.
Frank, I could have put you in 100 interviews. You wouldn't have said what we just heard there.
This is true.
Richard,
but it
that's
is
not
illustrative
true.
of
Richard,
a mindset
that's
that
not
he
true,
has,
Richard, though.
which is a difficulty in terms of relating
if
to everyday
you've never
people.
been on a campaign and know every single day that when you're doing 18-hour days, when you're doing 15 interviews a day, it is exhausting at times, and there are trip-ups. There's no question about it. There are mistakes that are made during campaigns.
But the average voter doesn't see that. The average voter sees what comes out on the TV.
And today, with all of the terrible mistakes that he has, NASCAR buddies, et cetera, we're in a race that could go either way. What does that say?
You just spent the entire last block saying how awful the state of the country is, how the president has done absolutely nothing, and how everybody wants to fire him, and yet they don't, from looking at all of the polls that we have and looking at the paths to election.
Well, they're not ready to replace him with Mitt Romney.
Of the voters for Barack Obama, 3 out of 4 voters, of likely voters, like him, are voting because they like him. Of Mitt Romney, it's 48-47 that are voting because they like him, and 47 because they don't like the person he's running against. People are voting in spite of the candidate at the moment for Romney. I'm still confused after 2 segments what he can do, whether he has it within him or not, to convince people that they want to vote for him, not just what they want to vote against Obama. And listen, I'm listening to you guys. I still haven't heard that argument.
3 things. Number 1 is stop listening to the consultants about what they think voters want him to be like, and be yourself, even if it's somebody that the consultants tell you voters can't relate to. That's number 1. Number 2 is he has to talk policy specifics. Right now, we know he wants to cut taxes, and we know he says he's going to cut spending, but he really hasn't offered a detailed analysis of what specific programs he's going to cut to pay for those tax cuts, or is it just going to be an increase in the deficit? So get very specific when it comes to actual policy proposals. And number 3 is I think he has to let Paul Ryan kind of be the bad guy in terms of attacking the president, and he has to take the high road.
I mean, I
and
thought
just
when they picked
not
him,
mention the
they were
president
to let
at
him
all.
go, and I haven't seen him
Just
angry
one
enough.
problem with that. When Romney releases the specifics of his tax plan, the American people aren't going to want it.
Well,
Hey, guys, we'll talk about that one a little bit later. Now, when we come back, today an anniversary of sorts, and many people thought a year ago it wouldn't be a much bigger deal. The Occupy movement tries to recapture energy from their camp out at Zuccotti 12 months ago. But what has the movement really accomplished, and will its message be hijacked from the fringe? We're going to take you live to Lower Manhattan for some of those answers.